everyone, and welcome to my most dreaded video of the year. We're talking about my favorite books that I've read, and if you're not new here, you know I don't like ranking things. I'm not very good with superlatives, so I ended up working on this list, reworking it, returning to it, and being like, did I even like these books? Do I even like to read? Many times. So this list, as a disclaimer, is what I am feeling in this exact moment. By the time I sit down to edit this, and certainly by the time I hit publish, I will feel iffy about my choices. So I will not be ranking these. I do have one standout favorite, which is rare for me. I can pick my favorite book of the year, but other than that, we're just going to chat about close to 20 books. I started off with a list trying to make it my top 10, and then I added an honorable mention section, which ended up also being 10 books. So these are really books that perhaps when I was reading them, they were just like a fine reading experience, but the stories for some reason stuck with me. And so these are really more like the books that I can't stop thinking about in 2024. But I'm confident with the picks that I have ended up with. So I'm gonna pull up the list, but as I do that, I want to mention a service that has helped me so much, continuously trying to become a better booktuber, and I do that with the help of Mirror. Mirror is a browser / productivity tool. It's sort of like if Notion were to be an internet browser. You can really easily separate your tasks into different sessions. So for example, if I'm studying Korean, it's about time for my Korean class online, just whip that up. All my notes are there, all my study materials, all the vlogs that I watch, etc. But also for me trying to get better at being an actual book reviewer, I have a booktube section where I have NetGalley, organizing all of my arcs, any kind of outreach to publishing houses, my scripts, my research, all of that is right there. So when I suddenly have an idea, zoom, go right there. There's also note-taking features. There is a focus feature, focus mode, where you can set a timer and a task. So not only will it give you like a timer of how long you should be focused, but if you start to like try to open Instagram or something like that, it will stop you and be like, excuse me, you put here that you're trying to focus on studying Japanese. What are you doing looking up AO3? Stuff like that. Yeah, just really wonderful, especially if you have a lot of projects, a lot of classes, for example. Highly recommend it. I'm a little biased because my husband built it. My husband made it. If you are trying to get a jump and you want to be more organized and more productive in 2025, highly recommend you check out Mirror. I will have that link in the description box. There's also a mobile version, which is where I took all my notes. So, but also speaking of apps that I love, let's go through my story graph. It's also like threatening snow, so we're gonna get a lot of like gloomy and then sudden bursts of sun throughout this video. Welcome to January in Korea. Okay, so allegedly, according to Storygraph, I read 209 books this year. My average time to finish them was a day, but that's incorrect because I just always log it as like the day that I read it. Like I don't keep track of how long it takes me to read a book, so that is a incorrect statistic. For moods, I usually read emotional, adventurous, mysterious, and dark. I enjoy a medium-paced plot. I like medium-sized books. Most of the books that I read were between 300 and 500 pages. Top genres were fantasy, romance, LGBTQIA+, young adult, literary, contemporary, a sports, right, sports, because one of the books that is actually on my top list is technically a sports book. Let's dive into the list. You've sat here long enough listening to me yap. In we go. How should I do this? I'm gonna start with the books that I put in my honorable mentions. But once again, this was more of the like, just can't stop thinking about them kind of books. Okay, I'm gonna start with one that is sort of the reason why I call this the can't get it off my mind book. Because it wasn't necessarily one of the best books that I read this year, but I find myself returning to it and really enjoying the ambiance. And I found that I then started to search for books that could give me the same feeling that this book did. Clearly it did something to my psyche, and that is God of the Forest. This really wasn't what I expected it to be. This is a thriller set at a summer camp, a very like prestigious old money kind of camp. There was just something about it. I think it was also that I read it during summer. I loved the atmosphere of summer camp. I read a lot of, I'm actually currently reading one as well, this kind of like old money America, corruption kind of vibe going on. I don't quite know what it was. There were lots of loose ends that were never tied up too. I feel like perhaps that's why my brain kind of keeps returning to it, because I'm like, why were those characters so weird if they weren't involved in this disappearance? Like one camper goes missing. Maybe people are just strange. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like God of the Forest just kind of surprised me. I just love reading books that take place in the woods. I have learned this year. So, God of the Forest. After that, we have a book that I read actually the last month of the year in December, and that is Swimming in the Dark. I believe it was last year for my top books of the year. I mentioned Giovanni's Room, which, stunning. And Swimming in the Dark actually directly references Giovanni's Room over and over and over again. So I feel like it's appropriate to have this on the list as well. Swimming in the Dark, it takes place in Poland in the 50s, I believe. Again, with a summer camp. It's sort of like a work camp. You know, all of these kids who have just graduated from high school are sent out into the countryside to pick beets, like just to work the land, you know, before they then go into the city and get their jobs. And this is very much the threat of the Soviet Union looming over them. It's a very tense time in Poland, and we follow our main character who begins a relationship with a boy he meets at camp, and it's just this idyllic summer romance. And once they go back to the city and they have to live real lives and deal with this looming sort of big brother government, what happens? And it was just, I thought, really beautiful, and it's written in a sense of a man's reflection on sort of a letter to this boy, this love that has really defined his life. I thought it was just really beautiful, and it ended up being one of the last books I read of the year, so it kind of ended the year on a really great note. That is Swimming in the Dark. Keeping up with the Polish representation, a book that I just can't stop thinking about. I think while I was reading it, I was a little bit dazed and confused, but it will not leave my brain, and that is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. This was not what I expected whatsoever. I feel like maybe it was the title, maybe it was the prestige of, I believe this one, the Booker. I was perhaps a little intimidated by it. I thought it was going to be like very, I don't know, a book that perhaps takes itself quite seriously, and this was a funny book. Like, this was a darkly, deeply funny book in some cases. It's about a woman who is living in a cabin throughout the winter, and usually these are kind of like summer homes, so the cabins are not occupied except for, I think she has like one neighbor really, and it's just about one winter when things just kind of go off the rails a little bit. It was just a story that kind of took me by surprise. I'm not sure that I actually think it is a book that I would want to reread, just because so many of the details are already lost to me, but I just remember reading it and being like, huh? I also this year tried to read the Imposium, and that also was like, she has this very dark sense of humor that I really appreciate. Or maybe it's not intentional and I'm not supposed to be finding things funny, but like for some reason her books are just, they take me by surprise each time. And so I got about 30% into her newest book and didn't have time to finish it because it was from the library, but yeah, I feel like that, just for simply the pleasant surprise factor, it gets an honorable mention here. Another book that I thought was going to be very intense and ended up being very funny in a dark way, my first Clarice Lispector, Hour of the Star. I wanted to start reading Lispector, and it was recommended that you start with Hour of the Star. This was her last book. It's also very short, and having now tried to read Agua Viva, I will say Hour of the Star is very accessible. I haven't read any other Lispector, but reading Agua Viva, maybe it was also my mindset, but I was a little bit like, whoa, what's going on here? Hour of the Star was like immediately drew me in. I had such a good time with it. I read it in one sitting. This is a book that breaks the fourth wall in such a delicious way. We have our narrator telling us the story of this one girl, but most of the book is our narrator telling us that, like, you know, she's not really that special. She's not really worth being talked about. But yeah, I'll tell you the story anyway. And it's just, something about it. I have the physical. I was kind of flipping through it before this video and just looking at the things that I annotated. I underline, I swear. Like, more of the book is underlined than not. It was just such a fun read. Again, this unexpected fun to it. Again, very dark, but I so deeply enjoyed Hour of the Star. And again, very short, very accessible, highly recommend. Last on my kind of short books for honorable mentions is Foster. Very quickly, this is by Claire Keegan, who I love. Foster was a short and devastating read. I believe it was like the last line had me in tears. Like, luckily I got home in time. I was reading this, as I do, always risky, but I was reading it in public in a cafe, and I think I finished it while I was home, and I was just reading that last page, just like, whoa, gorgeous. It's about a girl who, her family is too big. Her mom is pregnant, simply does not have time to be watching all of her kids and dealing with a pregnancy, so this daughter is sent to live with her aunt and uncle, who are elderly and don't have a child in their house of their own. It just follows this moment in time when she is being essentially fostered by this family, and how different it is, and how just, I can't say anymore. Beautiful Claire Keegan, Foster. Switching gears a little bit, a book that I can't get off my mind because it's too long. I read this Woven Kingdom. This is by the same author as the Shatter Me series, so she loves 1,000,000 books. She cannot tell a story in 100 pages or less, like some of these women. And that's fine. That's great. However, this is a slow burn fantasy that is so slow. We are on book 3. The plot is at a standstill, but for some reason I can't stop thinking about it. This is based on Persian folklore. We have a prophecy, we have a prince, we have a reluctant heroine or bringer of chaos, depending on which side you're on. I can't say much more, but if you are looking for, I feel like, a romantasy with actual plot to it, even though it is moving at a glacial pace, I really appreciated her construction of the characters, and her writing style is just so unique. It's very different from Shatter Me. Shatter Me was written in a very 2005 peak dystopian YA fiction style, very kind of experimental and like not like the other girls sort of writing that makes no sense, but this is much more poetic and just really beautiful. So even though I am frustrated to no end by this series, I can't get it out of my head, and thus here we are talking about it in my 2024 wrap up. This Woven Kingdom. After that, one that is sitting on the edge of honorable mention and favorite books of the year is Where Sleeping Girls Lie. I loved Ace of Spades when it came out and kind of took over BookTube, and so when I saw that this author was coming out with another book, gotta get my hands on it. Where Sleeping Girls Lie is a thriller that takes place at a boarding school. Our main girl has never been to a proper school. She's been homeschooled her whole life, and for reasons unknown, reasons we will uncover, she is finally going to school. And when her roommate on her first day, okay, like this girl isn't like already stressed because it's her first day of high school. On her first day, her roommate goes missing, and we follow this missing persons investigation, but our main character is trying to figure out what happened, but she doesn't have all of the pieces of the puzzle because most of her classmates have known each other since they were in kindergarten, and she's walking in, she's known these people for a couple days. So slowly we get this picture that is built of kind of this tangled web of all the drama of like, oh, well, they were best friends in 4th grade, but then somebody stole this, and then, oh, but they were, and I loved it. Very dark. If you need to look up the trigger warnings, I recommend that you do. But I just thought it was a really wonderful piece of work. I think I liked it better than Ace of Spades. So visual. I can picture the school. I can picture every scene so well. Where Sleeping Girls Lie. And my last two for honorable mentions, really quickly, is Hollow and the Haunted. This was, unfortunately, the first book in a duology. I thought it was a standalone, but here we are. This was wonderful, short and sweet. It's about a world in which there's magic. Certain families, I think it's all revolving around necromancy, but certain families have certain magical powers. Our main character is gifted with lifting curses. He also has a little bit of the gift of prophecy and seeing ghosts. And what happens when he sees the ghost of a boy who isn't dead yet and who also happens to be his family's enemy? Like, we don't talk to this family, okay? He feels a sense of responsibility because he has seen this death prophecy, and they work together to figure out how to change his destiny. And it was simple and sweet, and I really appreciated it. So that is The Hollow and the Haunted. I don't want to go too much into it, but if that sounds kind of up your alley, I recommend. And last but not least, on Can't Get It Off of My Mind, honorable mentions is Zamy, A New Spelling of My Name, a biomythography by Audre Lorde. So similar to Le Spectre, this was an author that I wanted to read this year, and after doing some research, looking at where do I start, it was recommended that you start with Zamy, and I'm so glad that I did. This is like it says, a biomythography, which Audre Lorde says combines history, biography, and myth. This just details Audre Lorde's life. She grew up in Harlem in the 30s and 40s, and it delves into how her parents really sheltered her from a lot of the racism that she was faced with. She talks about going to Catholic school, talks about being legally blind when she was young. And then we follow her into the 40s and the 50s when she is exploring her sexuality. She has quite a few relationships where she starts to wonder what it is to love, what it is to be in a relationship. She talks about lack of belonging, even within people who should be relatable to her. It was just really eye-opening, and I'm glad that I read it, and I'm excited. I think this was a great jumping off point because now I have this understanding of her life, childhood to young womanhood. I think the story kind of ends when she's more in her mid-20s, I think. She lives so much life. Like, that's what I just kept thinking. I'm like, she would talk about something and then she'd be like, yeah, so now I'm 19. And I'm like, oh my, that happened in a year? Like, she lives so much. Yeah, I think that gives me a great jumping off point to go into her other work now, knowing what she has lived through, what she sees as her kind of foundation. And yeah, it was highly recommend. Again, sometimes books can seem a little bit intimidating, and this was not at all. The way that she wrote, it was just, I was glued to the page. Yeah, that was Zamy by Audre Lorde. Okay, honorable mentions done. I can't believe those were just my honorable mentions. Let's dive into the top 10. What I decided was my top 10 when I wrote this last week, and I'm gonna try not to edit it. I'm just gonna stick with it, okay? Here we go. You have likely, if you watch this channel, you will not be surprised by this list, I think. So starting with one of the books that I read in the very beginning of this year, I believe. It is The Library at Mount Char. I have talked about this book so often. I'm so sorry. This is a bizarre little book that I recommend if you like Gideon the Ninth. If you are okay with incredible amounts of violence in this book, truly every form. I cannot give you enough trigger warnings, but at the same time, it was so, God, I hate to say it was so funny and so dark. We are following a group of children who are raised by their father, with a capital F, to become experts in certain subjects. So we have one son that knows everything about the animal kingdom and he can speak to the animals and blah, blah, blah. And then we have one girl who knows everything about medicine and healing and the human body and everybody and all of these things. Because it's not a spoiler, because their father is God. Or is he a terrorist, according to the government? Who knows? But yeah, we're following the main character who has my full name, which I've never seen in a book before, which is really, really bizarre. Of all the characters that could have had my name, it had to be this one. So, Carolyn, if any of you guys are named Carolyn, just a warning. we're whack in this book. What happens when God goes missing? We follow our main character as she realizes that her father has gone missing, and who's going to fill that void? What's going to happen? What is the truth of their upbringing? Like, what was that? Like, why, where were they taken from? Did they have parents? Why can't they share information? Also, like, the kids are not allowed to be like, hey, teach me how to talk to the squirrels. Like, you can't share subjects. It was just, like I said, fascinating, so violent, so funny. And I thought the ending was just so well done. I don't remember if it's the exact ending, but kind of the ending of one of our characters' stories is so well done and just, can't stop thinking about it. The Library at Mount Char. Next up, a short one that I can't stop thinking about or talking about is The English Understand Wool. This is a story that in less than 70 pages just was such a satisfying little read. Truly just such a well-written short story. We're following a character that has been raised by her parents in unbelievable wealth, the top 1% of the 1% of the world, until one day her parents go missing, and the book kind of follows the daughter for the aftermath of this, and she is attempting to write a book about it. She has been told that she should cash in on her billionaire parents going missing, and so we also follow her as she tries to perhaps write a book about it. It was delicious. It wasn't like a life-changing book, but I just thought it was a perfectly written story. Can't ask for much more. So, The English Understand Wool. Next up, we have a book that is another one that is just one I can't get off my mind. I wouldn't say it was the best book I read, but for some reason, this just scratched an itch, and it was so unexpected. This was, I think, I don't even know how I found out about this book. I don't know how I'm rating it higher than some of the books that are like on my honorable mentions list. So once again, this is just a jumble of books that I enjoyed, okay? Ones that I can't stop thinking about. This is When Ghosts Call Us Home. I am such a sucker for books about books or books about other pieces of media that don't exist. When Ghosts Call Us Home is about a horror movie that doesn't exist, a cult classic. We get a lot of excerpts from like chat rooms and things like that, endless threads of theorizing and things like I love that. I love fandoms more than I necessarily love the thing that people are fans of, and so this was just something about it scratched an itch in my brain. We're following a girl who is returning to her family home. Her parents were architects, and so they were kind of constantly, her and her sister were constantly moving, and their last big project was fixing up this old mansion on the edge of a cliff. And while they're living there, her older sister ropes her into filming a horror film. They're like teenagers, they're preteens when they actually make this, and it's very just like home movie, kind of Blair Witch Project-esque. When it is released, it just blows up and it has a life of its own, and so this girl's life is defined by this film and her famous older sister, the director. So when her sister goes missing and then a documentary filmmaker invites her to film a documentary about the horror film, our main character goes and sees if perhaps she can find an answer to where her sister went. And just that blur of like, is it special effects? Is it a dream? Is the house really haunted? There was something about it. The way that the scenes were described, it was just eerie and delectable. Something about it. I just can't stop thinking about it. And I enjoyed it. It's young adult, I believe, but really wonderful. When Ghosts Call Us Home. After that, so quickly, You Should Be So Lucky, Cat Sebastian. Every Cat Sebastian book I read is my favorite Cat Sebastian book. This is a laugh out loud, tears streaming down your face with sadness, incredible little romantic comedy. It's a historical romance, I believe it is called. It takes place in the 1960s in New York City. We follow a journalist who is tasked with helping a new baseball player ghostwrite a weekly column in the newspaper to help get some popularity back, because he is like rookie of the year on his old team. So when he gets bought by this team in New York and he has a horrible slump and the entire city, if not the entire world, hates him, we've got to help him out. So this journalist teams up with this golden boy, and it was beautiful. It was funny. It was sad. There was so much Yankee slander, which I did not appreciate, but you know, we move. So lovely. I love Cat Sebastian so much. There is like a sprinkling of baseball. I personally love baseball, but like if you don't know anything about it, you don't need to. It just talks about what was it like to be gay in Manhattan in the 1960s, especially if you were in the limelight. Ugh, I kind of want to read it again now that I'm talking about it. I love Cat Sebastian so much. So you should be so lucky. Don't let the baseball theme deter you. It was my one sport book of the year. According to Storygraph. Gorgeous. A gorgeous, gorgeous book. Next up, we have To Shape a Dragon's Breath. This is another book that it didn't blow me away when I was reading it, but I keep returning to it in my mind, and I can't wait for the series to continue. This follows our main character who finds a dragon egg and raises this little baby dragon, which in and of itself sold on the book. But the real story starts with she has to leave her village and go into the city, which is ruled by the people who have colonized her land. Because even though there used to be dragons on this land, there haven't been many in so long that the knowledge wasn't passed down of how to raise a dragon. And so she goes to this school, and it wasn't for me thinking like, oh, it's a dragon and a magical school book. It didn't have as much kind of action and magic and dragons as I thought there would be. This is much more about what it is to have your culture erased and what it is to try to fit yourself into the form of people who want to erase you. And I just thought it was really brilliantly written, and I loved all of the characters. I've heard also that it's an incredible audio book experience. Yeah, I can't wait now, knowing like how the world has been set up, what our characters are up against. Now I think the action is really going to kick off in the continuation of this series. I believe it's a trilogy. But yeah, this is one that my brain, I just keep coming back to it. So even if you aren't necessarily interested in fantasy, I would still give this a try because it was just a really great character study, I think. So that is To Shape a Dragon's Breath. Speaking of an audiobook experience, you know me, I'm not really an audiobook girl. I have not found a speed that works for me. I haven't found a way to keep my attention on the book. I have found the only time I can work with an audiobook is when it is nonfiction. And even then, it's hit or miss for me. But this book, the combination of the narrator, the author is reading the book, her voice, her delivery, the subject matter. This is a perfect audiobook. And it is Braiding Sweetgrass. I've heard so much about it. I was going to read it. I actually think if I had read this physically, I don't think it would have hit the same. There's something about the author's voice. I get chills. The full title is Braiding Sweetgrass: Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. Yeah, it's basically just about different indigenous ideas, ideals, beliefs, and how, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we incorporated those into kind of modern times. And specifically, I remember I actually wrote about it. Chapter 5, the concept of gift, giving and receiving, just the concept of what is a gift. If you are not interested in the entire book, just look at chapter 5. It's just so beautiful. And it made, I think if you want to start the year in a really wonderful mindset, I just found myself like so grateful and at peace. I can't recommend it enough. Braiding Sweetgrass, the audiobook, chapter 5. Something that I think anytime I'm feeling a lack of hope or feeling lost or feeling just, what's the point? I think that's a book that I'll return to kind of center me and calm me down. Like it really felt like a meditation. Gorgeous, stunning, Braiding Sweetgrass. Next is a book that I feel very basic for putting on here. This is another one that could be switched in with my honorable mentions. But you know what? Intermezzo. And this is coming from someone who is still on the fence with Sally Rooney. So this is not just me putting it here because of a blind love of Sally Rooney. I really loved this book. I was very unsure with the first chapter, but as I continued it, that last part 3, couldn't put it down. We're following 2 brothers who have recently lost their father. It's just about this, I suppose, like what I got out of it was more of like this tangled web of life that you cannot excuse yourself from. And even though the more that you connect with people, the more complicated your web gets. But that's what life is. And what would we be without it? I don't know. It was, again, just a very, very beautiful book that stuck with me throughout the year. I will say another book by an Irish author that I did not put on here, but should have maybe. I can't really tell because it's a recent read, so I don't know how long it will stick with me. But I did also read Evenings and Weekends. This was another book that follows a tumultuous time, this time not a death, but a pregnancy. We are following a group of people living in London during a very hot weekend. And I also thought that was really beautiful, and so should potentially be on honorable mentions, but again, I just read it, so I don't know how much it will stick with me. But yeah, I think if you liked intermezzo, definitely give Evenings and Weekends a try as well. So okay, last 3. I do have the physical of this one, and I got the ugliest cover, so we're going to use a different cover to talk about Martyr. I was not sure about this one. I think I got this one confused. Oh, what was the other book that I read? It was another book that was just one word and it was an exclamation point. I had attempted to read one book and I just wasn't into it. Oh yeah, I kept getting this mixed up with The Fraud. I'll show you the 2 covers that I saw. So I started to read The Fraud and it just didn't click with me. I kept thinking I already tried reading Martyr and I wasn't really into it. I need to give myself more time before I pick it back up again. No, I had never read Martyr. And so when I started reading it, I was like, what was I thinking of? This is great. And I could not stop. This is about a boy who is kind of obsessed with martyrdom. He wants his death, not necessarily his life, but he wants his death to mean something. He and his father immigrated from Iran in the 80s after his mother was tragically killed, sort of a casualty of war. Her plane, and this is a true thing that happened. There was a flight that America mistook as some kind of threat and we shot it down, and it was just a civilian commuter passenger plane, and his mother was on that. And so his life is just sort of defined by that, and we follow him as he goes basically through college and has this obsession with martyrdom. And he's also struggling with addiction and just like, again, not caring what his life means, but caring what his death means. And when he hears that there's an artist in the Brooklyn Museum of Art that is dying from cancer and has refused treatment and is using her last few weeks of life to just sit down and talk to people, he flies to New York to talk to her. And so we kind of follow him through that. And just a book that I, again, couldn't put down and was just stunning. I highly recommend it. That is Martyr. Last 2, we're almost there. This one really quick because I've talked about it so much, is Air by Sebastian. This is a fantasy, a continuation of one of my favorite fantasy series, Ember in the Ashes. This was marketed as being a part of the Ember in the Ashes world when it is a direct continuation of the Ember in the Ashes story. So I would not dive into this if you have not read Ember yet. But Air, I do think that the fact that it is a continuation of one of my favorite series made it get as high as it is on my favorites list. I wouldn't say that it was like a life-changing book in and of itself, but just the way that this author writes fantasy and constructs worlds and constructs characters, I just love it so much. And I love this world in particular that she's made. So I've had such a rough year with fantasy. As you've noticed, like for me, as you saw in my story graph, fantasy is my most read genre. I love fantasy so much. And there aren't a whole lot of fantasy books on this list. It was a rough year for fantasy. So Air just like reminded me that I do in fact love the genre. And I just need someone to write it really, really well. And Sebastian does that. And for that, I am so thankful. So that is Air. Once again, don't read that as a standalone. You got to read Ember in the Ashes and you will thank me for it. Yeah, that's Air. And last but not least, my favorite book of the year, which is the only one that I can say confidently is my favorite book of the year, A Memory Called Empire. This was my year of sci-fi. I also will give a quick honorable mention shout out to The Blighted Stars and these burning stars, if you are looking for more sci-fi. Yeah, this was my year of sapphic sci-fi specifically. A Memory Called Empire. What do I even have to say? This is taking place in space, obviously. We are following a newly appointed ambassador. She represents a small station at the edge of this vast empire, and she gets sent to the center of this empire, to the city, again, to be an ambassador. But she's walking into chaos because her predecessor died from anaphylactic shock. No. He was murdered. And so is she gonna be assassinated too? Like, why? Who? Why? What's going on? She also has a faulty memory chip. So in her particular station, you can upload and download memories. And so she gets the memory chip of her predecessor, which is supposed to help her understand what happened, but he forgot to upload anything for the last 10 years. So she has an old chip and she has a damaged chip. So instead of just like the memories becoming her own memories, just absorbing into her brain, she actually has the consciousness of the old ambassador in her head. So she's kind of going crazy. It was written so delightfully. This was a book in which I felt my imagination grow. Like, what can we do with language? Like, I've been reading so much fantasy that takes place in worlds that are so similar to ours. So really, even though there is magic, I haven't ever felt like, wow, that's a totally new idea. You know, that's something that I've never even considered. And with this book, the world was so different. And the cultures, like, again, this empire is very vast. So there are all these different cultures, all these different people. There were certain, like, cultural differences that never occurred to me. There's just all these tiny little details. A lot of the characters come from a culture where they are obsessed with epic poetry. And so just literally just the words on the page, the language that they use is so different and exciting. And it just makes you think about things that you might take for granted. And for that, I'm so grateful. It was truly just so new for me, and I had such a fun time with it. That's a Memory Called Empire, and I don't recommend it to everyone. I think this isn't a book that everyone is going to love, but for me, it was gorgeous, and it sent me down the rabbit hole of reading other sci-fi. Like I said, this was the year of the sapphic sci-fi for me. I feel like A Memory Called Empire, not only was it a great book, but it kind of blew the door off the hinges in terms of me getting back into sci-fi. And I can't thank it enough. Can't thank it enough. So that is my long list of books that I can't stop thinking about this year. Please let me know your favorites in the comments, because I really want next year, I want to expand what kind of genres I'm reading. I want to go back and read books. I found that books that hit for me were actually books that were written a few years ago, if not a few decades ago. So let me know. I want 2025 to be a better year. And I think that I can make that happen. I just might need your help. So yeah, let me know your favorites down below. And yeah, thank you as always for being here. So once again, thank you to Mirror for sponsoring this. I will have all that information down below, but please check it out. Get yourself organized, even if it's just for like your TBR. I have a whole section for my TBR. Have fun with it. It's really a really wonderful tool. So yes, I will leave you here because as you can tell, my voice is shot. The clouds are moving real fast. So I will actually, here, I'll show you. So yeah, I gotta go. But thank you as always. And I will see you next year. I've got my December wrap up. You got a sneak preview of some books that I read in December. Then on to a new year. I'm reading one book right now that's actually, I'm excited to talk about it. Let's just say in my January wrap up already. So the year is already off to an interesting start, and can't wait to see what we get up to in 2025. Thank you always. See you next time. Okay. Bye.